This is the Loaded Radio Podcast.
Hey, how you doing? It's Scott Penfold, and great to be back here for another edition of the Loaded Radio Podcast. I know it's been a while as we've been making some changes to, well, just say some appropriate changes to the podcast and some of the production stuff, so we're happy to be back nonetheless, and a great way to come back. I'm going to be airing part one of a two-part series I've done, as I recently had the chance to sit down and talk with Neal Kay. Now, Neal Kay is a former London-based disc jockey who was very important in the rise of the new wave of British heavy metal, along with Tommy Vance. This would have been like in the late 70s and the early 80s. This guy was the guy that managed the rock club called the Bandwagon Heavy Metal Soundhouse. Did that from 1975 through 1980, which was it was the backroom of the Prince of Wales Public House in Kingsbury, North London, but it was the place that really brought the new wave of British heavy metal to the masses in the way of a club. Papers of the day like Sounds and Melody Maker, they were very involved in too. If you were a rising, burgeoning metal band in the time, you brought your demo to the Bandwagon Heavy Metal Soundhouse. You brought it to Neal. Now, Neal Kay's notoriety grew, often going out on tour with bands like Black Sabbath, with Ronnie James Dio, Rush, AC/DC, Judas Priest, and many more. He also helped in arranging and producing demos of new bands like Saxon, Praying Mantis, and Iron Maiden. In 1980, he was the MC for the very first Monsters of Rock festival at Castle Donington, which was headlined by Rainbow, Scorpions, and Judas Priest. He's also been an avid promoter for heavy metal concerts and tours worldwide. He was even a band manager for a brief time in the 80s and 90s. He also has the biography, Neal Kay, Recollections of a Rock DJ, which is available now. You can get that at maidencroatia.com. And that is written by Stefan Juras with a forward by Iron Maiden's own Steve Harris. So definitely a great read if you're into the history of metal and more particularly the new wave of British heavy metal. When it comes to heavy metal today as we know it, this guy is such a large and massive part of it that it's just definitely, he's a gentleman that I've wanted to actually get on the show here for quite a long time. So it is great to have him with us this week. I'm talking, of course, about former London-based disc jockey, one of the integral parts of the new wave of British heavy metal as a genre, and even metal today. That's Neal Kay. Neal, thanks so much for joining us on the Loaded Radio Podcast this week.
Yeah, I'm all right. This is quite funny, actually, Scott, because I haven't done a pure radio one for a long time. But I used to do a radio show in London anyway.
Yeah.
That's going to be, listen, it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm a very fun person.
Sure.
It's a bit of a weird mix. I'm sort of very, very serious about music. But I'm also a real fun person. I'm very gregarious. That's what I am.
Gregarious is good.
My mum's dad was a vaudeville entertainer way back in the 1920s. He was a song and dance man, and entertainment runs through my family on my mother's side. All the cousins that I have been in entertainment of one form or another.
Yeah, Neal, I really did want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us this week here on Loaded Radio. And absolutely, it's an honor, really, because you were the one who came before all of us when it came to metal radio and being a metal DJ. So it's great to have you here.
Scott, I'm very, very sort of normal in most respects and very down to earth. I never see myself as any great shakes, to be honest with you. I'm no hero, and I did a job because somebody had to stand up and be counted a long, long time ago. And I just considered it my work. That's what I did. You know, how it's progressed and what's come from it never ceases to amaze me, not least the longevity of a great band from East London called Iron Maiden.
Absolutely.
You know, they are exactly, or they've done exactly what I said they would do on the back of the Soundhouse tapes all those years ago, 45 odd years ago.
Right.
They've taken the world. They're still there. I believe them now to have become a British institution and very great ambassadors of our land around the world.
Absolutely.
I'm fortunate enough to count Steve Harris as one of my good friends. We do talk. Only last week, I think it was, for an hour or so on the phone. And I know the family. Yeah. And, Steve is as quiet off stage as you can probably imagine he is. He's very reticent. He's very shy. He's not into great dramatics or anything, you know?
Sure.
And I'm absolutely amazed at the way that rock has developed. I don't always agree with the way it's developed, but I'm delighted that the music that I had to fight so very hard for to establish, in my view, as alongside all the other mainstream forms of music, has survived. And today it's treated by members, not only members of, the public, our followers, our fans, but the industry and others. It's a very, very serious thing now. Whereas back then, we all got laughed out of every doorway we ever entered.
Right. Well, Neal, how did you, first off, you started off as a DJ. How did you get into DJing, and why did you get into DJing?
All right. It's a real good question. Look, Scott, you got to remember something. I'm 73, right?
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I cut my teeth. I grew up in the 50s.
Yeah.
Before there was any television. Mm-hmm. That was life as it was in black and white. Right. I mean, we all did as we were told. Parents dressed you the way they dressed. You came home from school, you did your homework, you had your tea, you went to bed, finished.
Right.
There was nothing to do. There was no teenagers or anything. I got involved in DJing from a youth club. I went to the local youth club when I was about, 13 or 14. And I built the youth club's first discotheque system. I was into sound and stuff even then.
Yeah.
The League of Youth Clubs in Great Britain came up with this idea as the 60s moved into 1965 of having a national youth club DJ championship. And of course, my youth club wanted to enter me for it. And I won it 3 years running, and they wouldn't let me go in for it again. They got a bit fed up with me winning, really. I used to do sort of house gigs and things even back then, but the youth club's where I started. And I built a very successful youth club discotheque on Sunday nights up there. It was full, playing the sounds of the day, because that's what we had. It was obviously all vinyl. But by the time 1967 had come around, I had answered an advert in one of the evening papers for a London club, a West End of London club, that needed a new DJ. I was underage, actually, at 17.
Oh, okay.
But I thought I'd go up there anyway because I was feeling lucky. To my utter amazement, I got the job. I was London's youngest club DJ. Now, we worked 6 nights a week from like 8 till 3 in the morning. And I did that for a couple of years, moving around.
What kind of music were you spinning back then?
Well, it was the music of the mid 60s.
Yeah.
1967 was the year of flower power.
Sure was.
We were playing. There was nothing underground really back then. Sergeant Pepper's came out in 1967.
Right.
Most of us in latter years considered that to be the sort of dividing line and the birth of where pop turned into rock.
Right.
In 1967, you had Jethro Tull living in the past.
Right.
But there was barely anything underground at all. The Yardbirds were probably one of the best bands for that.
Agreed. Yes.
They appeared in the 1965 David Hemmings movie Blow Up, and there's a club scene with them in that where they smash up their back line.
Right.
And they also, they do a number in that called Stroll On. Now, Motorhead copied that later and turned it into The Train Kept a Rolling, but it is the same number. But apart from that, we were just playing the pop music of the day. Birds from America, Mr. Tambourine Man, Scott McKenzie, San Francisco. It was all the music of the day. There was nothing hard and heavy.
So was it 1970s Black Sabbath debut album that did it for you? Like, what was the album that sort of just clicked for you that brought you into that genre?
No. It didn't work that way, Scott. There wasn't any one album that did it for me. I'll tell you what happened. About the beginning of 1969, I saw an advert again in an evening paper for a disc jockey wanted for the Playboy Club in West Berlin. And I'd had 2 years of professional, experience in London clubs. Mm-hmm. And I never lost a floor, and I never got booted out of any club.
Right.
So I thought I'd have a try for it. I had to drive up. Well, I drove up. I went on the train to Manchester to meet this German agent. And lo and behold, my first future wife to be, Michelle, and I got the job. We were taken on. She is a dancer with the original Young Generation or something like that. She was back in the 60s. And we were hired to go over to West Berlin. Me to play, I had to do 2 clubs a night, which the first one was I had to do from 9 till midnight. It was a huge, great underground rock club. It was called the Big Eden. It held 2,000 people.
Wow.
And that's where I first really ran into rock. By now it's 69. You've also got the first Zeppelin album as well.
69, that's right. Yeah.
You've got Sabbath. And there were a whole load of other things as well. They were like jazz fusion bands like Gravy Train. They sounded a bit like Jethro Tull. They were very good.
Then what was it about about this rising, burgeoning scene that was metal that really appealed to you?
It was the strength and the guts of it. And also with classic rock, as it's now called, I like the melody of it wasn't the first coming, it was the second coming. Mm-hmm. I mean, I heard MC5 kick out the jams.
Great song. Yes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was 67 or 68.
67, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. And it was, look, the times they were a-changing. It was obvious in 67 that something big was going on. Mm-hmm. We all knew it. Look, I went to see 10 years after in The Who at the London Roundhouse.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
For about 5 shillings and sixpence.
Oh, wow.
With the Maximum Axis light show, liquid wheel projectors.
Yeah.
Fucking hell, what a show. And then, of course, in 69, you had Woodstock as well, which was a culmination and a social event for the alternative society. In America, obviously, we're very anti-Vietnam War. And over here, there was a lot of support for that too, as it happens. But that was a culmination of the end of the 60s. 67 really did see, things change. Yeah. I mean, we had The Who from 1963 or 4.
Yeah.
We had My Generation. We had Substitute, Yep. There were bands around like that. And back then, you could actually hear them on the radio, on pirate radio.
Yeah.
Because the BBC wouldn't play anything but fucking Mantovani most of the day. They had absolutely no manners at all, totally unscrupulous.
Right.
A waste of time to deal with, which is ironic because I came to work with Tommy Vance's producer, Tony Wilson, at Total Rock with Malcolm Dome much later on. But I had the BBC, funny enough, here a few years back to interview me, and they still stick to that really old-fashioned entertainment format. They had to call me an impresario. Couldn't call me a DJ or anything else. I was an impresario.
Right.
Like that twat that booked the London Palladium, probably. I mean, for fuck's sake. I've had a couple of Canadian film crews here to the house as well, and they were a lot of fun. I really enjoyed working with them. The BBC are as stiff as hell, they are. And they were back then. I don't know how Tony stuck it with them, actually. We used to put on some great parties, and it was a terrific time to be alive. Plus, we were watching the whole of the music movement somehow move a little more underground with progressive rock.
And one thing I really wanted to get into with you, which I think is so important in the development of the era too, was 1975 to 1980. You managed the Bandwagon Heavy Metal Soundhouse. I mean, that was really essentially the birthplace of the genre that really brought it out there to people. I mean, what was it like at the Bandwagon back in those days?
What was it like? Yeah. Well, you had to be mad to get in there.
Well, how did you get involved with the Bandwagon Heavy Metal Soundhouse?
I'm coming to that now.
Oh, are you? Okay.
I will tell you, at the end of my service in the West End clubs, music was changing. As soon as Philly sound came in with bands like the OJs, I was out of there. Last club I worked in was Gulliver's, which was in Mayfair. Very snotty. I was in the downstairs so-called blues and rock room, and in the main hall upstairs was a different DJ playing to posers and twats, and there were mirrors running down one side of the place, and they used to watch themselves grooving around. I had a massive. I got called upstairs one night because the DJ upstairs was phoned in sick, and they wanted me to play the set upstairs, which I absolutely hated. And about 1 or 2 in the morning, this Arab came in with his entourage and sycophants and all these women, and he insisted on playing the same bleeding Barry White track over and over and over and over and over again until I was bored shitless. And I happened to have with me Laurel Canyon, songs from Laurel Canyon by John Mayall, the blues guy, you know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I put on Walking on Sunset. With the end result, the manager came up to me and told me, to stop playing that shit and play what that fucker wanted. And I just said, well, fuck you, you play it, I'm leaving. Good night. That was that, and I did leave. So I went trucking for a couple of years. I couldn't get a job. I didn't want to work in clubs anymore because I hated the music. Mm-hmm. It was absolute shit. And after serving my time in West Berlin and having my ears open to a whole load of underground rock, as it was then called, mm-hmm. I found that it really moved me. It moved me heavily, right. Totally. I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it, actually. I'd rather not work and play shit and be false to myself. So I went trucking. I got a job with a trucking company. I got my licenses and tickets, and I was working for a company called Cavendish Woodhouse down in the central London area called Paddington. We were delivering furniture, unfortunately, to a whole load of unfortunates. I don't know how else to put them.
Right.
You buy furniture that's made of balsa wood, and it's bound to fall apart sooner or later. Something very similar. Mm-hmm. Anyway, in the course of working with this trucking company, I had a buddy, that used to share the driving with me and the pumping of furniture. Anyway, he said to me one day at the end of the day, he said, listen, I know a place in Kingsbury that you are going to love. He knew I was heavily into rock music. He knew that. He'd been to this place in Kingsbury, and he said, listen, meet me after work. We'll have a beer. I'm going to take you to this place, and you are going to love it. It was a Wednesday night. I walked in the door, and it was fucking heaven. I was just a member of the audience. The sound system was the biggest fucking thing I think I'd ever seen. It was huge. And it was like Martin Shavers, Altec Lansing horns, Gauss, loaded twin 15 bass bins. Fuck me. And it was only for playing vinyl on. It was unfucking believable. It really was. And halfway through the night, I was really enjoying myself. They were playing stuff like Peter Frampton, Do You Feel Like We Do? That, along those lines. Halfway through the night, one of them up there on the stage makes an announcement. He says, is there anybody here tonight as a DJ that would like to try out and work with us up here? And if so, please come up and make yourself known. Well, I went up. They gave me a trial live in front of everyone, and the rest is history. And then one day, about 77, the police raided the place because they discovered there was underage drinking going on. Well, there's bound to be, because the DJs up there were playing to the kids.
Sure.
And the kids, it happens everywhere, even now. They take their brothers or their sisters, brothers' passports for ID. The girls put their makeup on, and suddenly a 13-year-old looks 19.
Yeah.
They certainly do today. So we got hauled up into court. The police opposed the renewal of our license. I was asked by the pub manager and the guys that put on the entertainment who were subcontracted by the manager to represent us in court because I could speak well, very well educated, not afraid to talk to the magistrate or the judge, to plead our case. And that's basically what happened. The police put their case forward first and wanted the license to be completely nullified and not exist at all. The magistrate was a kindly old guy, actually. He asked if there was anybody here to talk on behalf of the pub and the venue. And I stood up and said, "It's me, sir." And I explained to him that on my one night of the week, on Wednesdays, we didn't have any trouble. People came mainly in couples, they were older, to listen to the music. They did not come to, fall about drunk. They were not kids. They came for an appreciation of great music, and that's how they left. There were no complaints on my night. And the magistrate asked the old Bill, the police, if that was so. The inspector grudgingly had to agree. So at the end of it, the magistrate swung round and he said this. He said, "I am going to grant provisionally your license for 6 months on the provision that, first of all, you start a professionally run membership for everybody, where you have their name and proof of age if you need it, and you retain the information as to address and phone number, etc. And only your kind of music shall furthermore be played in this venue." Ha! He's given me the bandwagon for 6 nights a week. Unfucking believable.
Now, being that was the beginning of the era, and you were just dead set in the middle of it, what would you say are 3 essential new wave of British heavy metal albums for somebody just getting into the genre?
That's an almost indecent question, really. I mean, my tastes in music are far broader than the new wave of British heavy metal. I know I'm known for it. Well, I've got to name the first Iron Maiden album as one, undoubtedly. Look, Malcolm, Dome and I only think there's ever been 3 British heavy metal bands anyway. That's Black Sabbath, Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. The others not mainstream and big enough.
Black Sabbath or Motorhead?
Oh, Motorhead. Not very good musically. Sorry about that. I know Black Sabbath, yeah. Well, I suppose the album that Bloody Sabbath comes from is about as good as it gets.
That's a great album.
It doesn't get any more archetypal than that. But I'd have to name a Judas Priest album or something like that, because I think Priest are amazing. And you should know as well that I was actually managed by Mike Dolan for Arna Carter for about a year and a half. Judas Priest management. They had me signed up. That's how I got the first Monsters of Rock at Donington in 1980.
So would you say maybe British Steel for your Judas Priest album then?
No, earlier. Earlier. No, I don't think British Steel.
Rock-a-Rolla was good. Sad Wings of Destiny.
Yeah, that is too early. I mean, one of the earliest has got to be Sad Wings of Destiny, isn't it?
It's the second album. It's a great album. Yeah.
Yeah, but is it the new wave of British heavy metal? This is an arguable point, Scott.
Sure.
To a lot of people, it never went away anyway. Punk tried to interfere and destroy us, which is one of the main reasons why I went to war. I would not let that happen. Punk to me is a disgusting disease. It's totally unmusical, played by a bunch of morons who wouldn't know a semi-breathe from a quaver. Sorry. And to me, it's never happened. And I think you'll find Steve Harris probably says the same thing. The pair of us absolutely hate it. Mouthy, stupid little kids mainly who couldn't play to save their lives. I would not support a non-music form of entertainment. I wouldn't do it. And the war was that because it was so profile-laden at the time that it appeared, every venue wanted it because it brought business in. But what it actually did was bring scum in, personally. Never, ever allowed it in the bandwagon. Not one tune. Never. And to me, it's never happened because I won't support it. It insults my integrity and my love of real music. I am today as well a producer, arranger. I have worked with orchestras too, and doing albums and stuff around. And there is absolutely no way that I would ever condone anything to do with that or anything else that's shit. I won't have it. I'm a purist, I'm afraid, Scott, and an old guy. You've got to put it down to my background, my years, my age, and what I believe. And I believe in the excellence of the art form known as real music. That's what's driven me all the time. I suppose Motorhead to a lesser degree, they're fun. I knew them very well. I knew them very well. They did a personal appearance at the Bandwagon for me. Mind you, so did Ted Nugent, Sammy Hagar, Cozy Powell, a whole load of others came for me. Never got Ronnie James down there, unfortunately.
Oh, really? Even with Sabbath?
No, he played, but not at the Wagon. They just did personal appearances.
Oh, I understand.
The Wagon was only small. I could only hold about 800. No, Ted Nugent was the first to come to the Bandwagon for a personal appearance. Up until then, it had never happened.
And there's part one of my talk with Neal Kay, former London-based disc jockey, as a very important man when it came to the rise of the new wave of British heavy metal, along with Tommy Vance back in the 70s and 80s. And part two of my talk with Neal will be up next week. And in part two, some great stuff there where Neal talks about being with AC/DC singer Bon Scott on the night he passed away, his friendship with Iron Maiden's Steve Harris, and what he thinks of metal today. So definitely tune into that next week right here on Loaded Radio Podcast. Again, don't forget, check out MaidenCroatia.com to get a copy of Neal Kay biography, Neal Kay Recollections of a Rock DJ by Stefan Juras, and with the foreword by Steve Harris from Iron Maiden as well. A great read and just a great delve into the history of the essential beginnings of the new wave of British heavy metal. Don't forget, check out loadedradio.com for your hard rock and metal news, as well as the 24-hour metal stream with all the shows. You can get all the info at loadedradio.com. You download the free Loaded Radio app via loadedradio.com or wherever you get your apps, where you can listen to the stream wherever you go. Get all the updated hard rock and metal news right to your device, and as well listen to past episodes of this very podcast. Okay, so I definitely recommend you check it out. Once again, it's loadedradio.com, and we will talk to you again next week for part two of my talk with Neal Kay right here on the Loaded Radio Podcast. We'll talk to you then.
Loaded Radio.